Yo, welcome to another episode of the Right People, Right Places podcast. I'm your host, Raul Mendoza, and this is another solo episode that I'm putting out there to bring some value, to bring some help. If you're in talent acquisition, if you're in human resources, if you're in-house recruiting, or if your agency, this is a little value for you. If you've been following along and listening to other episodes, fantastic. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to my subscribers and those who have been following along. And if this is your first time joining in, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. And if you find what I'm about to say valuable, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and feel free to follow me here. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, TikTok, X or Twitter, and would be happy to continue providing value to you in whatever arena you find yourself in. So what I wanted to talk about today is the importance of recruiting and experimentation. Experimentation is something that is near and dear to my heart, and in recruiting, it's so important. I would dare say that experimentation is important in whatever field you're in and whatever you're looking to accomplish. In fact, the idea really didn't begin to crystallize for me until just about a couple years ago. I was working for a marketing technology company, working with some brilliant software development talent, and this idea of experimentation and really began to captivate me as they were talking about it in the software space and the importance of it in that space. But I saw it so applicable to any area of life, really. And when it comes to building your own company, when it comes to coming up with strategies to find top talent, when it comes to problem solving and dealing with difficult employee relations or team dynamics, I think experimentation and iteration is such a great framework and a great activity if you're looking to build something and bring value to your organization, to your company, to your customers and clients. So yeah, that's what I want to talk about today. So just the importance of experimentation. So let's give a little definition. What is experimentation and why is it valuable? Experimentation is simply this. It's taking an idea. It's taking something that maybe even works and has already been invented, so to speak, and maybe tweaking it a bit, adjusting it a bit, adding your own take or spin on it, and seeing what that does, and learning from that experimentation exercise and actually executing on that idea, and then building on what worked and letting go of what didn't. I think for me, this has become a pretty regular activity for me in the recruiting space, with new technologies coming into play here in recent years with AI. Talent acquisition has been evolving for years. And in order for us as successful talent acquisition people to continue to be successful in finding top talent, you have to experiment with different ways of connecting and attracting top talent. When it comes to messaging, when it comes to approach, when it comes to where to find top talent, you have to constantly mix that up. The talent space is very dynamic. It's changing all the time. It's been changing over the course of my career, but it's never changed at the pace that it has been in the last several years, or I should say in the last couple years. So I think whereas experimentation and iteration have been a part of recruiting historically, I think it's even more critical now that this be a skill set that you build as a recruiter, as a business owner, as an HR practitioner. I think it's critical that you build this skill because things are shifting and changing and moving so quickly. We have to be building and iterating, experimenting and building on what's working and what's not. You just have to, otherwise you will get lost in the pack. And that's how you continue to bring value to those in your team, your customers, your clients, to candidates that you're working with, that you're looking to place and find homes for. You got to be creative, and creativity needs to find its traction in experimentation and iteration. So that's a little bit of a definition on experimentation. We have to be mad scientists and try things out. Maybe something that hasn't worked before, trying something that hasn't been done before. I think one of the things that is needed for experimentation and iteration is you got to have your ego and your pride. You got to leave that at the door. You got to take risks with ideas. It's just part of life. That's how you grow. That's how you learn. And I think that's why experimentation and iteration is so important, because it is a cycle of improvement. You're taking something that's an idea and you're doing something with it. There's a lot of idea people out there. There's a lot of people that have a lot of great ideas, but how many of those great ideas actually become something? And that's why experimentation is so important, is because it gives context for the expression of ideas. And not only that, it gives you valuable data that you can learn from the experiment itself, that you can build on and iterate and keep moving. It's such a valuable framework and skill to build in whatever space you find yourself in. You got to have the courage to move on your ideas, and what better way than to experiment and iterate on those things. But you've got to set your pride aside. You've got to set your ego aside. And you also have to be able to receive and take feedback. There's no way that you can build something that is of meaning and value for a client, a customer, for an internal stakeholder without feedback. I'm always getting feedback from my customers as to what's working and what's not. And in fact, actually, I'm the one that leads the conversation there. I'm the one that is reaching out to them and initiating that conversation. I'm not waiting for them to come to me and say, hey, this isn't working. I'm going to them. I'm getting ahead of that conversation and asking them, hey, this isn't working. I'm seeing that it's not working. My data is showing me that it's not working. Here's an idea though. This is what I'm going to start trying. And having that proactive approach, I think, is birthed out of a mindset of experimentation and iteration. If we're just maintaining, that doesn't bring anyone value. But if we're experimenting and iterating, we're actually building the muscle of learning. One of the benefits of having is that it can institute AI into our workflows and institute AI into our daily work, is that actually it allows us and frees us up to do the more meaningful work that we all love to do, whatever space we find ourselves in. But I think the inverse of that is that people are also becoming increasingly lazy when it comes to learning and just having a mindset to, I'm just going to automate this and expect great results. No, you're not bringing yourself value, and you're not going to bring those working with value if you're looking to just automate your life and make things easier. That's not what this is about. This is about bringing value. Feedback is so important in the process of experimenting and iterating. You have to have that feedback loop. You have to be proactive in not only giving feedback, but receiving feedback. And it's a great way to build genuine, authentic relationship. If you're someone that receives feedback really well, people want to work with you. And if you're someone that cares enough to give feedback in a right context, in an appropriate way to other people in the work that they're doing, you're going to be someone of influence and of value to them, because not everybody's willing to tell you the things that you need to hear, and not everyone is willing to receive the things that you need to hear. So that's how you forge a network, and that's how you forge great partnerships and relationships with stakeholders, business, or even in your own personal life. The best marriages have the best feedback loop. Yeah, feedback. You got to be good with feedback. You got to think of it as a gift. You can't think of it as a curse, or you can't think of feedback as a negative thing. You have to think of it as a positive thing to help you build, experiment, and iterate on what you're looking to deliver. Yeah, so that's a little bit there, I think. So we talked about experimentation and iteration, what it takes to experiment and iterate, feedback, and having a feedback loop. That's absolutely vital. And having the courage to actually move on your ideas. This is the context that you can do that in. It's in experimenting and iterating and building. It's creating a set of data for you. And that's the trick here. I think my tips with this is 1, feedback. 2, I would say actually do something with the data that you get from your experimenting. Don't just experiment for the sake of experimenting. Experiment in order to solve a problem. You got to be clear on what your problem is. I would say that's probably another point here. You got to be clear on what the problem is. And I think the clearer you are on the problem that you're solving, the more meaningful the data is going to become. But if you're not experimenting and iterating, that clarity won't come. I think a lot of the times there's a lot of problems to solve out in the business world. There's a lot of problems to solve in recruiting. There's a lot of problems to solve in human resources. However, I think that we become clear on solving that problem as we're experimenting and iterating and receiving feedback, give and take with customers, clients, stakeholders, setting our ego aside, setting our pride aside, and having the courage to actually move on our ideas. I think to round out the conversation here, you have to execute. You have to execute on your learnings, and you have to execute on the data. Don't just experiment for experimentation's sake, but experiment in order to crystallize what it is that you're looking to solve in terms of the problem, and continue to refine those ideas and those learnings that you're gaining from the activity of experimentation and iteration. It's a loop. Keep the loop going. Build that muscle of learning and curiosity by keeping that loop going. Look, you don't have to be the fastest at this. The point here is progress. It's consistency, continuing in a process, not giving up just when something fell flat. Again, that's why leaving pride and your ego at the door is critical with experimentation and iteration, because if you're taking things personal, that's going to drain you. But if you're taking things in a way of, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm failing forward. And that's the whole process of experimentation and iteration. It's about failing and learning from your failure and moving forward and implementing your learnings, building on that failure with what you've learned and making it better, and boom, stacking that to the point where you have something that is valuable and clear. It's clearly solving a problem for your customers. It's clearly solving a problem for your clients. It's clearly helping you grow your business. But you have to engage in that process. This podcast, the Right People, Right Places podcast, this is something that I'm experimenting with and iterating on. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? And you got to start somewhere, and you got to learn from what you're doing. So I'm doing what I'm asking you to do, what I'm encouraging you to do. I'm practicing what I'm preaching. So let's wrap up this conversation. And, just to summarize again, experimentation and iteration are absolutely vital in recruiting and in whatever space you find yourself in. It is an activity that allows you to gain traction on your ideas. It's a great canvas to be able to see what sticks and what doesn't. It's a great way to obtain data and learning from that data and actually implementing changes. It's a great way to kill your pride and your ego and make it about learning through the process of failure and implementing those learnings. And yeah, that's the key. You got to do something with what you're learning. It's not just about coming up with ideas, doing something with it over and over again. They say that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That's experimentation without learning and implementing those learnings. It starts with execution and it ends with execution. If you're not doing something about it at the beginning and at the end, you're not building anything. So there. I think I got it all out of me. That's what I wanted to share with you. I hope you found this valuable. If you've listened to the very end of this episode, I want to thank you for chiming in here at the comments below. If you found this valuable, go ahead and hit the subscribe button to this podcast. I can be found on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on X, on TikTok, on Facebook as well. I've got a presence there. Love to engage with you, love to help you. If you found this helpful, wonderful, share it with others in recruiting, in talent, in human resources, or the people space, or in other areas, and pass that value on. So thanks for listening in, and stay tuned for more episodes here in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Peace out.